As I drove home after Rosh Hashanah lunch, I wanted to do what I always do. I wanted to call my grandma and wish her Shana Tova, but I couldn't. This was my first High Holy Days without her. I missed hearing her voice on the other end of the line. I missed receiving her glowing, if a little bit biased, review of my sermon. I missed hearing her thoughts on the quality of the live stream, which she was surprisingly adept at using for a 104-year-old. I drove home in silence, not knowing quite what to do. My father and I are still in our year of firsts. First holidays without her, first birthdays and starts of school years, first funny things the kids said I couldn't wait to tell her about. Navigating that year of firsts is like navigating a map after an earthquake. Everything is changed, recognizable and somehow also out of place. The ground feels unfamiliar and unsteady. I am a cartographer, updating the map of life, redrawing the landmarks in their new, slightly altered positions. I will never stop missing her. Next year at this time, the grief will still be with me, but I'll have the map. I will have successfully navigated once around this new topography. And there will almost certainly still be surprises, unexplored crevices that will catch me off balance, but overall I'll have the lay of the land. The Jewish calendar gives us opportunities like Yizkor to return year after year and reconnoiter. The firsts become anniversaries, opportunities to examine where we are and how far we've come since last we sat here and read these words. Whether we are in the year of firsts, where the pain and grief are fresh and wild, or whether we have navigated these woods before down well-trodden paths, we come back to this same spot again and again so that we see how it has changed and so that we see how we have grown. We tend to think of our lives as a line moving ever forward. We make meaning in our lives when we construct circles, opportunities to return, to reconsider, and revisit. There is no better holiday for such a return than Simchat Torah, where we read the end of the Torah and without even a breath start again at the beginning. And in doing so, we construct a circle. Each year we return to Moses' final moments and read of his death, as if it were a Yizkor in part to remember him. And then we roll the scroll back and start the journey anew, a journey that begins with the moment of creation, a new beginning, but which will inevitably bring us right back here in 1 year's time. Rabbi Jane Rachel Littman writes, "There's a message here. Our human lives aren't like a Hollywood fairy tale, no matter how much we try to make them so. Life is full of false starts, unsolved cliffhangers, incomplete closures, premature endings, repeat stories, and going back to the beginning. Life, like Torah, is a wandering journey in the wilderness, not a destination." Next year, we will read these exact same words just as we did last year. But next year, we will be different people. We will have walked the circle path once more. We'll have seen new vistas and learned new lessons. As Rabbi Littman continues, there is a spiritual maturation in this seemingly endless cycle. Each time we return to the beginning, we do so with a bit more experience and wisdom. Though we didn't reach the promised land, perhaps we learned a bit more in the last cycle of our journey. There is a richness and depth to revisiting important themes, both in Torah and in our lives. This morning we come to this service of Yizkor carrying all our individual losses, all the personal maps and travel logs of that circular journey of grief. And on this Simchat Torah, we come to mark an important anniversary for our larger Jewish world. Today, on the Hebrew calendar, we mark the end of the first year since the horrifying attacks perpetrated last Simchat Torah, the massacre of October 7th. To me, this feels even more like an anniversary than the Gregorian date of 10/7, because I remember waking up last Simchat Torah to the news coming out of Israel still fresh and fragmented and frightening. I remember the growing confusion and horror, the increasing awareness that we did not yet understand the severity of the news or the depth of our grief. The scale of human tragedy had yet to be revealed, And I remember getting ready for this service last year, wondering what I would say to you, how we would incorporate this emerging news into our joyful and mournful service of Simchat Torah Yizkor. I found my notes from what I said last year, just hours into this new world that was created by the earthquake of that day. My words were full of typos as I jotted them down just moments before coming into the service. Last year on Simchat Torah morning, I wrote, "My heart is breaking for the Israeli lives that have already been lost in the last few hours and for the lives that may yet be lost. I pray for families who have already been torn apart and for mothers whose children went to synagogue in the morning and will go to war in the afternoon. I pray for Palestinian civilians of Gaza whose leaders have made this foolish and deplorable decision and who will inevitably and painfully feel the burden of Hamas's decision to strike Israel, a war they didn't ask for either." Reading these words a year later, like a journal entry from the beginning of a trauma, it was shocking to me how little we knew and how much I was already afraid of. There's no mention, for instance, of the hostages because we didn't yet know that more than 230 men, women, and children had already been dragged into the tunnels of Gaza. But I already knew that a war was coming and that the suffering it would cause would be immense. When I wrote these words, I could not imagine the year of firsts that lay ahead. The first bombs dropping, the first ceasefire, a hopeful respite but all too brief. The first hostages to come home alive and the first ones to be reported dead. I could not possibly have imagined that we would be here marking the first anniversary and still there would be 100 hostages waiting to be freed. And closer to home, the first rallies in support of terror and the death of Jews, the first wildly inaccurate news stories, the first campus encampments, the first time I wore a yellow ribbon. And now I'm back here again after all those firsts. A map of the depression and desolation clutched in my hand. The journey the Jewish people have walked this first year has been one of loneliness and isolation, one of heartbreak and horror, though along the way there have also been moments of light and hope, unity and community. And now we return once again to this holy day, this last first anniversary. We are like pilgrims who come every year to the ancient temple with our Sukkot offerings. But this year, whether because of flood or famine, our baskets are diminished, our offerings are paltry, our hands are empty. We complete another circle. We are acutely aware of how we've changed. In her sermon on Yom Kippur, Rabbi Silk taught us about the tradition in the ancient temple that the pilgrims would circle the upper courtyard counterclockwise, with the mourners circling in the opposite direction from everyone else. And as the mourners passed, each person would acknowledge their grief and their growth. Round and round they would go, encircling each other in the embrace of loving community, holding each other up as they made the long, arduous trek. Today we walk that path together, holding whatever we have come to offer, dragging whatever we have come to unburden. Some are walking clockwise and others walk against the stream. All of us are circling and offering each other strength as we pass. The last letter of the Torah is a lamed, and the first letter of the Torah is a bet. Put together they make the word lev. As we read the end and the beginning, as we close another circle, some brokenness in our hearts is restored. To walk the mourner's path, step by step, circle by circle, but year by year, is to find our hearts have been strengthened as we rediscover gratitude and joy. The primary tradition of Simchat Torah is dancing joyously with the Torah in what are called hakafot, literally circles. As we walk and walk, spiraling up and out, our circles grow from solemn to celebratory, from tears to triumph. Perhaps this is what the psalmist intends when she says, "God, you turn my mourning into dancing." The circle itself offers us the possibility of hope. There is a tradition in some communities when the Torah is read on Simchat Torah morning that there is a special aliyah called Kol HaNe'arim, literally all the children. A few honored members of the community come up to bless the Torah along with all the children present. The adults hold a tallit over the heads of the children like a little sukkah. Together they all recite the blessing over the Torah, and then the last and first words of our story are read again, the circle once again complete. This is the heartening image of walking the circle. We are the children, repeating the story year by year, blessing the Torah and being blessed by it. And those who are no longer here, our loved ones and ancestors, they are holding the talit over our heads. They are sheltering us and blessing us in their sukkah of peace. The story is passed from generation to generation, each of us a link in an unending chain, circles holding on to circles, drawn from the dawn of time to an unknowable future. We never stop missing our loved ones who've gone. We cannot go back to the landscape before the earthquake that shook everything up. Hopefully the sharp, jagged edges of this new topography soften over time from the rain and from our footprints as we traverse this unexplored and all too familiar land. I will never stop missing my grandmother. I will think of her when I pass her picture in my hallway, or when I wear this talit that she knitted for me. Or when, years from now, I get the momentary urge to call her before remembering that the number has long since been disconnected. I will wander the woods of memory cycle by cycle, year by year. But I'm writing the map and I'm finding my way. And along the journey, my sadness that she is gone is becoming gladness that she was here. Today I walk the circle path in the hopes of turning memory into blessing. May we find comfort in the journey, from cycle to cycle, landmark to landmark, from the beginning of the scroll to the end, and back once again to start anew. We take a few moments now for silent memory.